GM. Hello, everyone.
Everybody went for coffee.
Not at all.
Thank you.
And then do I have a mic?
Guess we're sharing a mic. Great. I think it might make sense to give brief introductions. My name's Matt. I lead business development for Para. Para provides a comprehensive suite of wallet and authentication tools for crypto developers.
Hi, I'm Yelena. Sorry, this is really tall. Okay, I'm Yelena. I'm the co-founder CEO of Noble. Noble is a purpose-built chain focused on stablecoin and RWA issuance. And yeah, very relevant topic for us. So thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Rohit. I'm the head of product at Coinshift. And we are building a yield-bearing stablecoin with partnership with Paxos, Morpho, and Steakhouse. So I think that's a great topic for today, and yeah, that's about it.
Hey, I'm Cyril. I'm contributor to F of X protocol, and F of X basically delivers two different products. The first one is a new way to take responsible leverage, delivering 7x leverage on ETH with minimal liquidation risks and no funding costs. And the second product is a decentralized stablecoin backed by Lidos ETH, which is 100% capital efficient and has high and sustainable yields.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Ng. I'm the founder and CEO of OpenEden. So OpenEden is a RWA tokenization platform, end-to-end, and operating out of security licenses in Singapore and digital asset license out of Bermuda. So we have recently launched our regulated yield-bearing stablecoin called Open Dollar, and it's fully backed by on-chain tokenized treasuries. So nice to be here.
Awesome. What a great panel. I think it might make sense for us to first talk about the distinction between stablecoins and RWAs. Are stablecoins RWAs? What is an RWA? Start with you.
Yeah, I've always conceptually thought of stablecoins as a type of real-world asset if they are indeed backed by real-world assets such as treasury bills or cash deposits. Obviously, we have stablecoins that aren't, that are algorithmic, kind of more decentralized. An example being RWA, where you can mint obviously a stablecoin with ETH. You can argue DAI is somewhat of a RWA, maybe it's a bit of a spectrum. So depending on how the stablecoin is structured, it may be an RWA or it may not be at all.
The way I see it is you have stablecoins that are backed by RWAs. So like T-bills is an RWA, like you can have other assets as well. So if in the reserves of a stablecoin you have a real world asset, you can call it a stablecoin backed by an RWA. So that's definitely an overlap.
Yeah, I think you guys said it basically. Yeah.
Great. So maybe we'll start with the elephant in the room. Like, what makes one of these things good or bad, conversely? Maybe Jeremy.
Yeah, maybe I can start. When we talk about stablecoin, I think it's quite obvious. You look at it, it's supposed to be stable. So stability is the most important thing. And if you are to peg with the US dollar 1-for-1, then you need to ensure that your stablecoin will remain pegged. And how do you ensure that? It depends on your reserve collateral, how you manage it, and what it consists of. So I think for us at OpenEden, we look at it from three perspectives, right? One is to ensure that the underlying asset that is collateralizing the stablecoin is the safest assets in the world, and that's why we chose the US Treasury bills. Which is the most liquid asset. It trades about 150 to 250 billion dollars a day. And well, so far the US government has not defaulted. Hopefully it stays that way. And number two, it would be regulation actually. Because anybody can say that they are launching a token backed by XYZ, ABC. The question is, how do you know they actually are backing that token with those assets, number one? And number two, how do you know your rights as a holder of those tokens actually give you access in a Black Swan event that you have proper legal rights to those assets that's collateralizing that token? So there's no easy way to kind of look through that because none of us are lawyers. So as a user, I think one of the easiest way is to look at the token issuer, whether are they licensed or regulated, and obviously in the jurisdiction that is reputable with stringent regulatory oversight. Because then that means you have a big brother that has already looked through the whole product construct of the company, of the issuer, to ensure that nothing fishy is going on. I mean, if we all remind ourselves of FTX, because it wasn't regulated, what it means is that there's no audit requirement, and nobody knows whether the funds are segregated, between the operating company versus customers' funds, and unfortunate things happen. So I think we talk about trustless all the time in the crypto world, but when I look at some of these RWA products or stablecoins, users are actually very trusting because they are really fully trusting what the issuers say that they're doing, but they don't really kind of look into the weeds of things to ensure that things are really properly segregated. So at OpenEden, we fully believe that we need to be very responsible and accountable, and that's why it took a lot of pain to get licenses to ensure that we're regulated. We have to do certain kind of audit or reporting to ensure that the product that we produce for our users is exactly as what we advertise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview of kind of the product level concerns, right? Like, is it regulated? Is it compliant? Is it safe? Is it backed by proper collateral? One thing at Noble that we think a lot about is actually the issuance question, right? So how can I take this stablecoin from chain A to chain B, or DeFi app X to chain A in as little clicks as possible, maintaining fungibility, security, proper routing, proper pricing, all of these things. So I would say some stablecoins, obviously USDC and Tether, like being dominant ones, are really good at that, right? Like, it's really easy to get access to these assets. Part of that is liquidity, but part of that also is just like a issuance kind of solution, right? So for like Circle's USDC, you have their native bridge, their CCTP, right? That's like really easy to go between disparate chains. So that infrastructure is also really important, especially when you think about the hundreds, thousands, of liquidity pools. We had obviously a panel right before this. Like 20,000 liquidity pools that are like monitored by DeFi Llama, right? Like, that's a lot. How can you have these stablecoins be properly integrated into these systems is also a huge question. So yeah, the off-chain component stuff that you mentioned, super important, obviously. Like, you want to make sure we don't have another UST situation, but you also want to make sure that these are properly accessible on-chain, right? Like, they're permissionless to the extent possible. They're liquid. They're good price. They're well priced. Things like this. So,
you guys made you guys made great points about a stablecoin to be actually stable, to keep its peg. That's the main point, and to be scalable. And that on that regard, real world assets are great scalable collaterals. But there's another point of stablecoin trilemma I didn't hear you talking about. That's decentralization, and the best way to make sure the backing assets are really there is to have them on-chain and without requiring to trust any entity. Because, as you said, like, FTX wasn't regulated, but there was audits. And there's many different examples of regulated and audited protocols that just rugged people. There's a very recent example of Usual, for instance, which is a real-world asset protocol. There was a massive trust assumption on that protocol, and people just lost 15% of their capital because they made one decision, because people was relying on human decisions. And this is why I believe decentralization is a core thing in stablecoins, and this is why at FX protocol we built purely decentralized stablecoin with no human risk, basically, because I believe that it's not only about delivering good yields, it's also about having very low risks. And there's one risk you can never assess, that's the human risk. Because even when there's audits, you have to trust the auditors that have, most of the time, they have a commercial relationship with the people who pay for the audits. There's a bias. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for.
Stablecoins are like the cars of crypto. Like, you want it not to crash. You want it to be safe. You want to get behind the wheel, and you want to make sure you're going to get to point B. And I think with the examples that you just gave, whether that's like Usual or Terra, many examples, it's one complexity too. Like, these systems are have historically been extremely complex for most consumers to understand, and you don't want people to to know how to build a car so you can drive a car. Like that doesn't work. So you want people to have a sense of like safety and trust, and that the underlying mechanisms are legitimate.
Helena, you mentioned issuance. I just want to add that there's also a dimension for redemption. So it's as important as issuing a currency. Can I go back to the currency I started from? And I think USDC has done a great job at that. Like if you see, even on their website, they advertise how easily redeemable USDC is for $1. That gives the confidence for any holder to hold any stablecoin, because they know they can always go back. And there are a lot of challenges when it comes to redemption, 1:1 redemption at all times, especially if it's a yield-bearing stablecoin. But yeah, that's I think one thing that makes a stablecoin really good, on top of issuance, that is redemption.
Absolutely. We've mentioned a few themes here. I think the biggest thing I pull out is what's important is stability and trust. And I think there are kind of a lot of ways to arrive at stability and trust. And I'd like to kind of pull on how do different collateralization models affect the ability to like earn that trust from users, whether institutional or consumer, and how can we are we converging on like one model for stablecoins in order to establish this, or are there still other models that can work?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I think it all comes down to transparency. So a little bit of like what Cyril has kind of mentioned, that you want the reserve asset, the collaterals, to be transparent, to be visible. And one of the best ways is to bring them on chain, and I fully agree with that. So I think what we have decided to do, if you look at USDT or USDC, the two largest stablecoin, we know that their backing assets are mostly in treasuries and some cash, sitting somewhere.
We hope.
Yeah, we get to see it, either once a month or quarterly, right, when they send their audit report. So the question is, you're right, we hope, right? Now we at OpenEden, we try to breach that two things and bring that transparency as well as the security. So what happened is that our new stablecoin, Open Dollar USDO, is collateralized by on-chain treasury bills. So because it's on-chain, then you know that the asset that's collateralizing the stablecoin is transparent, 24/7 real time. And at the same time, we look under the hood of the quality of the asset. You know that it's actually underlying treasuries sitting in a regulated custodian somewhere, completely segregated. Nobody can steal it. So by kind of combining the two, we're able to give that trust element that is transparent, and at the same time, the underlying security of the asset is safe.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention in my intro. So Noble's also launching a stablecoin next week, actually, called the Noble Dollar. Actually, very similar to what Jeremy described. Obviously, the Circle and Tether model have worked like really well in terms of collateralizing these assets by highly liquid, RWAs, obviously T-bills. And there's other projects sort of coming to the forefront, kind of taking that model but improving upon it, right? In the Noble Dollar context, similarly, we'll have also transparent kind of collateral attestations once a day. So you actually have validators that can attest to the collateral backing the Noble Dollar on chain. And it's over collateralized, right? So 102% or so. So meaning you can. There's always going to be kind of enough, liquidity, kind of backing the Noble Dollar, which obviously we saw, not happen with Terra, with UST a few years ago when you had the death spiral and you had the collateral being, Luna. So. Yeah, for us, we also believe that T-bills are probably the best way, kind of in the short term, to collateralize these dollars, and it's also just a very symbiotic relationship, right? You're purchasing government bonds that back a fiat currency, which you're then taking that and representing it on chain for a whole wide variety of use cases that would not be able to exist if you just held that fiat currency kind of in your bank account. So definitely excited to see actually multi-collateral stablecoins come to the forefront, right? It actually can be different duration, like T-bills, right? Like it doesn't only have to be short-term T-bills. In the case of Noble Dollar and other sorts of RWAs that are also highly liquid and trusted and have some symbiotic relationship with the dollar itself. So, yeah.
I have a very simple answer to your question. How do we achieve trust for stablecoins? I think that the most simple answer is by not needing trust. And this is the purpose of blockchain. It's to abstract trust and bring trustless products. So this is why, but the problem with decentralized stablecoins so far is that they didn't manage to deliver stable enough and scalable enough products. And this is what we changed with F of X protocol and FXUSD's reserve-backed design. And this is how we managed to reach the top 30 stablecoins on Ethereum in just 6 weeks by delivering a perfectly decentralized stablecoin, because you don't rely on people to attest of the reserve every day on stuff like that, because you can just go on Etherscan and look for by yourself at the reserve at all times, and it's only backed by decentralized assets, so you don't rely on anyone emitting that decentralized asset on chain because it's already decentralized. And so I believe there's room for both designs. I mean, real-world assets have a real use case as well and are very scalable and so on. But so at the moment, I looked actually yesterday, there's only 0.3% of decentralized stablecoins. There's $225 billion of stablecoins on chain, and only 0.3% is decentralized. At some point, it may be a problem, especially when we see how democracy is kind of in danger. And I believe we really need, and our mission at F of X protocol is to bring a decentralized stablecoin into the top 10 stablecoins, so that people have a real decentralized alternative that's not censorable and that can rely on.
Yeah, I kind of have to disagree a bit with Cyril. I mean, of course, it's an interesting topic of decentralization, but I still feel it's a bit theoretical when it comes to stablecoins. Because for me, like what I have seen so far is stablecoins that have regulation, as Jeremy mentioned, and that they are actually backed by the most secure assets that have been around for hundreds of years. That gives more trust than, let's say, something like backed by Ethereum. That's just my honest opinion there. But just to come back to like what we do with Coinshift, we are also a T-bill backed asset. So what we do is we work with Paxos, which is, for those who don't know, after Tether and Circle, Paxos is the largest stablecoin issuer. They're also behind PayPal USD, PYUSD, and PaxG. So we work with them. They are fully regulated in Abu Dhabi, and they are issuing USDL, which is a yield-bearing stablecoin that is essentially holding T-bills in your wallet. And they work with Standard Chartered and the largest banks, and it's fully compliant, fully regulated. So that's USDL, and what we do is we essentially take USDL, put it into a Morpho vault, because T-bill yield is like 4 to 5%, so it's a boring asset, if you will. But what we do is we take it into DeFi, and you have a lending yield on top against blue chip collaterals. So on Morpho, you deposit USDL, and what you get back is CS USDL, which is Coinshift's stablecoin, Coinshift USDL. So that's what we do, and essentially what we are backed by is your T-bills, which is regulated, and blue chip collateral assets like CBBTC and STETH. And we also see like a lot of synergies with other stable coins as collaterals, very high graded stable coins. So that's essentially what we are doing.
Sorry. Yeah, I think there are different stable coins for different audience. I think there's something that we might not have been clear. So there's an audience of, say, the crypto natives, and they're used to decentralization, and they actually do trust Bitcoin or Ethereum as a collateral. So for those, I think there is different kind of stable coins that can appeal to them. Now, if you think about maybe taking a step forward to think about how we can gather greater real-world adoption, institutional adoption, then I guess for them it might not be something that they're comfortable to see Bitcoin or Ethereum as a collateral, and they probably are more comfortable with traditional asset classes like T-bills. So I think really, it really kind of depends on a different, cake for different person. But I think what is really important is, if you talk about having collaterals or asset that's on-chain, while it looks really good and transparent, but the question is, the moment that the collateral disappears for whatever reason, fraud or hacks or whatever, the stablecoin will depack, and it will be way too late for anybody to react, because it's like the moment the asset is there, and then the next moment it can be gone. So there's really no real, I think, true real safeguard to kind of protect that. So regulation is one of them, because as a regulated issuer, there is a much greater consequence if you, as an issuer, mess up, right, or doing the fraud or whatever, because you will serve jail time. If I do something bad to my stablecoin, I will go to jail, right, because I'm regulated in multiple jurisdictions.
If they find you.
Well, it's not difficult to find me. I live in Singapore. So I think that's why one way to kind of and create and build that trust is to be properly regulated and licensed, and that's why until this day, most people still trust putting their money in a bank, because they know that they are highly, highly regulated.
Yeah, this is a great point, and I believe there's a paradigm shift that hasn't happened yet, because TradFi institutions are used to trust. But when you trust, that means that you know that if anything bad happens, you will be able to sue and get maybe at some point your assets back. But it will probably take years. This is why I believe that at some point, it's not the case, you're right. At the moment, decentralized stablecoins are mostly for DeFi native or crypto native people. But at some point, these crypto native people are going to grow up and run institutions as well. And at some point, I believe that the trustless paradigm shift will happen, because not needing to trust is just like way lower risk after all. I'm not talking about Bitcoin on Ethereum, but Ethereum on Ethereum it's totally trustless.
One thing, we've been talking about decentralization, but we haven't been talking about permissionlessness, which I would argue is almost, well, we don't have to put these norms on a hierarchy. We can, but for me, permissionlessness is really important if you're thinking of a stable coin, right? Like, there's been an incredible push by regulators to, deem these stable coins as securities, across many jurisdictions. Unfortunately, like my home country, which is Canada, thankfully we have a regulatory kind of environment in the U.S. which will inevitably treat the stable coins as cash instruments. But I think beyond the regulatory environment, like, how do we as sort of builders make sure that these stable coins, these dollars or euros and other fiat stable coins, which I think have a long way to go in terms of adoption, how are they as permissionlessly obtainable by any person in the world as possible? Like, you look at the access to dollars in Argentina or Venezuela, that's harder than getting access to the US dollar in Canada, right? Because there's infrastructure in Canada, but the infrastructure in other countries isn't as robust, and the pricing isn't good. And my fear is that we're going to recreate those kind of barriers to entry on chain if we don't actually make these assets super permissionless, super easy to access, good pricing, and the like. So yeah, decentralization is obviously important. You don't want a single point of failure. You don't want tomorrow the U.S. government to default or whatever, and all of a sudden these T-bills are worthless. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think at the end of the day, in the short term, it's more about permissionlessness and actually making sure there's good access, no matter where you are.
Absolutely. It seems like we're kind of defining two camps here. One's decentralized, unregulated, and the other's regulated and fairly centralized. Do you think that there's an opportunity for these to kind of converge and take advantage of the benefits of both sides, the trust and stability that regulators give you, but also the permissionlessness and censorship resistance of a more decentralized solution?
Maybe I'll start. Yes, I believe there is a way to kind of move towards that. It's through a governance token setup. So with the protocol, have a governance token and eventually being decentralized from a decision-making standpoint to a certain extent, then you will be able to come to a middle ground where the community can start to influence, the way that the product or the stablecoin is being collateralized. So while obviously there's still another layer to ensure that whatever the proposal that kind of comes through still have to be subject to regulatory approval. So I think that way, I feel you can kind of combine both sides. That decentralized decision making, while at the same time protected through still proper regulation and oversight.
Yeah, I tend to agree to that. You have the collateral for any stable coin, and that could be a place where you can involve decentralization, where there is an unanimous vote that says we want this asset, we don't want this asset. So that could be a real use case for decentralization. Although yeah, centralization and regulation I think would still be a big part. That's one reason I see why 90% of the stablecoin market is centralized, or not more. So yeah, I think decentralization, as we would potentially go towards that, but it would be only a small portion on the collateral exposure. That's how I see it.
And I also see a way for maybe not to merge the two designs, but to find synergies between the two designs, because reward assets bring TradFi yield on chain, which is not very competitive with DeFi native yields. And on that regard, we can help bootstrapping real-world assets projects, because there's as I said, 99.7% of stablecoins are mostly real-world asset backed, and they need to compete each other with good yields. And for instance, what you're doing with your morpho strategies is a good way to get exposure to decentralized strategies, for instance, having them as collateral. So for instance, on FOX protocol, we deliver something like 22% APR on $36 million, and only 1% of this yield is token emissions. The rest is organic real yield. We're about to tokenize that as a yield-bearing stablecoin. That's going to be a great asset as collateral in morpho, and then real-world asset stablecoins could be lended against these yields, so that DeFi loopers could bring these yields to the real-world asset stablecoins indirectly.
Great. We're almost out of time here. I'd love to kind of ask as a last question, and we've kind of painted this picture where we have $225 billion in stablecoin market cap currently. About 65% of that is Tether, probably 30% is Circle, and maybe collectively 1% are these decentralized stablecoins. How do we penetrate the market dominance of Tether and Circle?
I'm sad this is the last question. It's such a good question. One thing, one major thing, so these dollars have proved to be extremely useful, right? They're pegged to $1. Yes, there was a bit of a depeg a couple years ago with USDC, but through and through, we've proven that you can have, hundreds and billions of dollars circulating on chain. But the collateral and the T-bills that collateralize these dollars that are really easy to use on chain, they're fungible, they're integrated with exchanges, that's not being passed on to end users, and that's not being passed on to distribution partners. So if you look at, obviously, Coinbase as an example, they are a major distributor of USDC, and therefore they actually do get the advantage of keeping a portion or all of the yield that is deposited into their exchange of USDC, and that's fantastic, and that's a great incentive for Coinbase to keep distributing USDC and coming up with innovative products. But if we had a way to do that, that is programmatic, that is DeFi native, where you can say, hey, we're going to redirect all of the yield to this liquidity pool, or we're going to redirect all of the yield to the validator set, or we're going to do a token buyback program with all of the yield that is earned from the circulation of these dollars on our protocol. You would get incredible flywheel effects and incentives for app developers, protocols, you name it, exchanges even, to actually be incentivized to distribute these assets. So yeah, I think the Coinbase Circle model is a perfect example of what can happen for the circulation and distribution of these dollars when you have these right kind of incentives in place.
So the way I see it, you have Circle and Tether have been around for over a decade now, and that's one reason why they are so big. But if you look at some other emerging players in the yield-bearing stablecoin market, or players who are giving a lot of exciting yield, for example, even Ethena just went to 6 billion in a single year. What I see is you have this trend where USDC and USDT had 99% of the market share at some point. Now they have about 90%. So it's gradually declining, and there is a very competitive space where lots of other stable coins are growing very quickly. And at the same time, the market size is also increasing. We are expecting $1 trillion market size for stablecoins in the next 5 years. So I definitely see like yield-bearing stablecoins is going to be the next big thing, and that can take up a lot of market share here.
Yeah, I think a trillion is pretty conservative, very conservative. We probably should hit that by next year. So I think at OpenEden we think of two things, right? Clearly, we're not trying to say that we're going to overtake Tether. I think that's a little bit far-fetched. So we think of value and community. So value from the perspective of giving back the rewards to the holders or the users, because they're assuming the risk of DPEG, so they deserve to also get rewarded by the underlying collateral yield. And number two is community. And with that, it means that giving them, say, quote-unquote, ownership through governance token and letting them be part of not just a user, but also part of a decision-making in a body. And that is not possible in either Tether or Circle, because they don't need your money, so there's no way they're going to sell you some equities. So I think that with these two, we can potentially start to kind of like slowly creep up in terms of the market share, and hopefully in a year's time, the 90% market share will drop to 80% or 70%.
And yeah, I would close with saying I'm very confident that at some point every users of centralized stablecoins will be disappointed for a reason or another, and this is we don't need to work on growth because they will work for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It's great having you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.